Hello you, and welcome to the last daily rundown of the week with me, Dan Morfitt. Thank you for watching Channel 7. The Daily Rundown is the show where we look at some of the day's big stories and some littler ones too. Tonight we'll be discussing the digital detox, Radio 1 and Loss, and their name is Rio and they like to burn the land. Ish. But first, let's welcome tonight's guest who will supply the Daily Rundown with insight and opinion. She's the economic academic and Green Party candidate. It's Wendy Olsen.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Hi, thanks.
Your 30th birthday is coming up soon.
Oh, yes.
We will talk about your presents later.
Big party.
Big party, poolside party. And also welcome back barrister and author of Just Your Average Muslim and Liverpool supporter. Let's never forget that fact. Zia Chowdhury, MBE. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much, Dan.
For once, you're on the sofa and the Reds aren't playing.
Yeah, it was bizarre, really. A bit of a surreal experience being here without some important event going on.
No European qualification or anything?
Nothing. Just friendlies.
They're never friendly. And you can get involved with the show too. We're at Twitter. Are you on Twitter? Join in the conversation at The Daily Rundown, or at the very least go there, give us a follow and find out all of our missives and see backstage photos and nonsense. We might even follow you back as well if you give us a little follow. Now, our first story tonight is that UK interest rates have been cut from 0.5% to 0.25%. That's a new record low and the first cut since the year 2009. The Bank of England has also signalled that rates could go even lower if the economy worsens. Now, the bank announced additional measures to stimulate the UK economy, including a 100 billion scheme to force banks to pass on that low interest rate to households and businesses. It will also buy £60 billion worth of UK government bonds and £10 billion worth of corporate bonds. Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, said there was scope to cut the interest rate even further. So is this Brexit, or was this coming anyway?
Well, it was coming anyway, but it's, quite a weird interest rate. If you look at your credit card bill, you won't find that interest rate on there.
So credit card rates 17, 28%.
Yeah.
But this is 0.25.
0.25, and they're saying they might reduce it to 0.1 later. So they're desperate. So
that's good news for people with mortgages, but not necessarily people who want to save money.
It's really, the actual rate is really going to have a small effect on households. But what they're doing is that's a signal. So they send this signal, and then along with that, they have this package of throwing money at the economy. I mean, there's a phrase in economics, helicopter money, and it means sort of giving money to people without deserving it. And that's what they're doing, but they don't give it to people, they give it to the banks.
Haven't we given enough money to the banks?
Yeah, it's when they buy bonds. So the banks are holding these bonds, and that's in a bond market. So a bond has a price, and the Bank of England's going in and they're buying these bonds, and they're prepared to buy like almost endlessly, but £60 billion today. So they just put the money in the economy, and then they hold the bonds, which doesn't really affect anybody or harm anybody. But the money then is with those banks to lend out, and they're supposed to lend it onward. But if you were a business person, I don't know if you borrow money, but you'd again look at your account bill and it'll say 10% is your interest rate for your loan. But they're trying to convince the banks to lower the interest rates and increase the funding. But the word I'm hearing from bankers is that they're just hoarding the money, and there's plenty of money for them to hoard, and you can't convince them to lend. So even though they have this really low interest rate. So they're saying about negative interest rates. That's when they charge you to store your money at the bank.
But wouldn't that just lead to a rush and people would just go out and spend money because...
That's what they want people to do, but because they're not encouraging individual households to spend money, they're encouraging businesses. The businesses are hoarding the money, and they've raised their reserves, and they're just really happy with the way their asset situation is looking, and they can then store some of the money in tax havens abroad. So we're not even getting the tax money off this extra spending.
So is this a completely ludicrous thing for the Bank of England to do?
It's not ludicrous, but it's like saying, I'm Mark Carney, I'm here to rescue profiteers. Here you go, have 60 billion more to use, to make money with. And if they want to lend to a construction company, they have the money available.
And they have
lend.
to do it at lower interest rates.
Yeah.
Now, Zia, does this make a big difference to you, 0.25% of interest rates?
No, I mean, the way this will be sold to the public is that, look, you will save £20 a year or whatever off your mortgage, and so the man on the street thinks that he is getting something. But the reality is, as Wendy says, that this isn't designed for the public. This is designed to send a message to the business community and the banks, and they've got form for getting money in the past and not passing it on down the chain. You know, they've kept hold of it. They've benefited from it, and this is more of the same.
Maybe that spin, though, is part of the dealings today by saying you might be saving £20 on a mortgage a month with this interest rate change. It gives the man on the streets an extra little bit of cash. It gives them more confidence in spending. Then they would go out and buy more stuff. No,
it's really a trivial amount of money. When I said it was a signal, I didn't mean for consumers. You know, it's meant to have a signal toward business, because the world picture is not very good. The world is sliding toward a world recession. Chinese growth rates have been declining. Rates in Europe are terrible. And the British economy, they don't like to admit it, but we're very likely to have recession now.
Because,
so
but we're growing as we're still growing as an economy, aren't we? But it's slowing down.
They're just not releasing a changed estimate. They're very close to admitting that it was 2.6%, and then it went down to 1.6%, and the next re-estimate is going to be.
Yeah, I think the forecasts for the next 18 months are that the growth rates are going to be reducing, and so they're already preparing us for that. But this signal, again, I agree with Wendy. It's a signal trying to be optimistic about it. You think, well, okay, business does need signals. And if we're to, post-Brexit, survive and prosper, then it's the business community that's going to have to be given dangled certain carrots, and maybe this is something that will ultimately, some way down the line, benefit the man on the street. But at this stage, I certainly don't think
it is amazing how money markets are lubricated not by formulas and not by strength of economies, but confidence.
And
more than anything else.
What Mark Carney says.
It's very, very strange that, especially as a governor of the Bank of England, which is independence.
But there are what they call the underlying fundamentals are very bad. So we really are. We've never had a close to recession situation. I call it a slump. We've never had one last so long, from 2007 to 2016. Normally the business cycle would be 3 to 4 years. 93, and then it got worse till 95, and then it recovered by 97. You know, you'd have a sort of cycle like that, and we are not in a cycle. And there's two reasons. One is that we're globalized. So Britain is now embedded in Europe, and it's embedded in the Chinese economy and the American economy, and so the whole thing can't move up and down so quickly.
So was Gordon Brown right to some extent when he said this is the end of boom and bust economics?
In a way.
Because there's been a bust, and then there's been no rise back up to a boom time.
But he wanted to take credit for it. But the interesting thing is that these buying bonds activities, quantitative easing, they started around 2008, just after the crisis, and they said it was temporary. But today he's admitted, Mark Carney has said, we will never unwind quantitative easing.
This is a mechanism now that they're going to use because they've found it works.
No, not that. A mechanism is one where they sell and buy, so they do both, and they don't actually put net money into the economy. So when they said they were going to buy these bonds, they would eventually sell them back to the market. That was the plan.
But they're just buying them at the moment and not selling them on at all.
And the ones that they bought earlier, they're not trying to sell those off, because if they did, it would change the way the market is. So can I just point out, when they buy the bonds and put the money there, the price of bonds goes up, interest rates on bonds and things goes down. So there's all this, sort of jimmering that's going on, adjustments that are going on.
It's robbing Peter to pay Paul in the short term, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that. I would say we're getting that through the actual capitalist enterprises, because the profit share has been going up steadily for 15 years, and the wage share has been going down. So although your productivity has gone up, your wage hasn't been going up to keep up with it. And it really makes a difference over the years, over 10 years. If your productivity went up, say, 2% per year, you should be earning 20% more.
But this is talking about that forgotten middle class where wages haven't gone up at all.
Wages have not gone up.
What happened on June the 23rd, the Leave votes, does that have any say with the economic conditions that we've got now? Or were we always going to have this interest rate cuts? Were we always going to have this new round of quantitative easing.
That's what I was saying. 2% growth, 2.5% growth was forecast for this quarter, and they've had to lower that forecast to 1.6%. No, and then they haven't adjusted it yet to admit to what's happened with Brexit. So we have these things called forward indicators, which are like subjective indicators. Ask business people, are you making investment decisions? There's a very strongly tested set of forward indicators, and they're really bad. So, for example, some well-known economists are just changing their affiliation at the moment. Blanchflower is one of those, because they're so concerned that there's going to be an absolute crisis of a recession.
So, irregardless of what happened with the vote, this would have been coming anyway.
No, it's because of the vote, because of Brexit and all the uncertainty around that. Construction firms are delaying investing. Other firms that might buy stocks in, they're saying, well, we'll just wait a bit. There are some firms that are doing very well. Those are the export firms. So I know in clothing, for example, in Salford, there's people working shifts and taking on labour, and there's some that gain from this.
And Zia, do you think you're going to be looking in your wallet next week and going, what is this government doing? What is the Bank of England doing? Or are you just going to keep on keeping on?
Keep on keeping on. I just don't see there's going to be any change in the foreseeable future. And my concern is not really at the moment for myself, because you think that you'll get by, but you just think that as long as the country keeps on keeping on, then hopefully some way down the line we'll turn the corner.
But do you guys not think it's kind of distanced? I mean, it seems like Mark Carney is in a distant upper elite who doesn't really care about the food banks and the homeless and the people that have no security.
But that's not his job to. That's why the Bank of England's been sort of hived off as an independent entity, not connected to the government anymore, isn't it?
No,
isn't it so they have that?
The idea of the economy that they have is that people should survive with the economy as it is, and you shouldn't have to go to government. So it seems to me it's very much Mark Carney's job, and that you shouldn't have to end up going to the benefits office to solve this problem. It's not a permanent solution. Whereas jobs and industry and services and small shops, those are the solution. But those are in a slump.
Well, it's one of those things that we're not going to solve tonight.
No.
Sadly. Right, time for a quick break now, but the three of us will be back in just a couple of minutes' time to talk about Rio getting torched ahead of the Olympics and Radio 1 being no longer the nation's favourites. See you in 3 minutes, back here on the Daily Rundown.